saying no? Okay? All right. All right. Our lesson this morning poses this question. Why is love the great commandment? I'm going right into the lesson. I'm not talking to you about a lot of other things because basically I want to get this lesson done. And I want you to know this too. You might say, seems like the last time he spoke here, he spoke on love. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, love trumps everything. We need to understand that. Faith we need. Hope we should have. But love is the one that is over it all. And through my years in the mission field, I came to understand this much, much better. So hopefully this morning as we take a look at this, we can see some reason. Okay, here we go. All right, I'm going to get it. It's the greatest command because, number one, it's the only effective motivation for our actions. Okay, I want you to think about this. We all do and say various things in our lives every day, right? We've got the deeds, we've got the things that we say. And we know that Jesus spoke of love for God as the greatest command. But love for our fellow man is the one that's, Jesus said, like unto it. In other words, you can't have one without the other. And John explains that better when he says, how can you love God whom you haven't seen? And hate your fellow man whom you have seen? Or hate your brother whom you have seen? So when we think of that, we have to understand the importance of love being the motivator for everything. Now, although love is, now listen to me carefully, commanded, it can hardly be instilled by command. Love me. Love me. I don't think my wife would take too kindly to that kind of direction on my part. Hey, you love me. Okay? So when we're looking at a command here, we need to understand some things about, yes, it is the greatest command. You know, back in the days of the Israelites and Moses giving the commands, and you go over to that 5th chapter of Deuteronomy, you're going to see, right? To love God and then to love your neighbor as yourself. These were the two greatest. Jesus would say, upon these two hang all the law and the prophets. The husband cannot gain or hold the love of his wife or children by command. I've tried it over at the cottage. They're not going to love me as long as I'm making the laws and I'm laying them down. But then there are moments when things are a little bit different. There's some tenderness. There's some, okay, now I'm going to be a little softer. And then that's when that starts to develop. But it's because I'm thinking about their welfare as much as my own. If I'm only thinking about the fact that I'm going to get things straight in this house, there's going to be a continual backlash. There's always going to be some kind of trying to buck what I say. If love is an action of the will in response to an authentic command, then it is a forced love. Compelled love is contrary to the nature of love. And if the greatest commands cannot be fulfilled by demand, we expect the same to be true of other commands. Yes, sir.
That's an interesting point, and I agree with what you're saying, but isn't it also the case that whereas we cannot command our children or spouses to love us, at the same time we can
cross, the one who called himself the Son of God, he is God, right? He's not God the Father, he's God the Son, but he is God. God died on the cross. That's as vulnerable as you can get, giving everything. Now, yes, he knew about the joy that would lay ahead. Okay, Hebrews 12, verse 2, I think. But the thing about it is, in love, we make ourselves vulnerable. Now we are giving. We're not trying to take. People who are just trying to take love and get love, but never give love. Well, there's another verse right there. In Acts we see it is better to give than to receive. Sometimes we get fixated on how much love can I receive. And I want to tell you right now, in this cottage where I'm living, they're fixated on what are you going to love me with next. You know, we've just been to the beach, now we're going to go to this and that. What about a Rays game? You know, okay, is that really a demonstration of love? Because first of all, it's they're caring about themselves. Now, that's children. But let's change it now to where we're looking at it through the eyes of God, at us. I would have surely thought at this time in life God would have blessed me more. I'm having to struggle with my health. I'm having to struggle with my finances. Folks, you see what I'm saying? Instead of saying, hey, every night when my head hits the pillow, I can say, I know that I have lived a blessed day. Because there are people in this world, if I saw their lot, I wouldn't be able to understand it. It's so hard. So, love is something that makes us vulnerable. And that's why when Paul wrote that, he was at the end of it. He says, when I was a child, I spoke like a child. Hey, that's my group. You know, Mr. Allen, what are we going to do next? Mr. Allen, where are we going to go? Mr. Allen, I just want one of these things. Okay. Lord, give me this. Lord, why didn't you do that? Lord, I don't understand why this is befallen me. When we love, we learn not to look just for our own good, but for the good of others. Everyone here that's raised a child understands how much you have to give. And yes, you are very vulnerable at those times. And in a relationship, you can become very vulnerable. I remember the first time I told Terry, I love you. Well, I was a 18-year-old kid. I knew all the things that I was thinking love was at that time. She looked at me and she goes, that's nice. And when I love you, you'll know it. You know, so I'm like, wait a minute. You know, I told you, you're supposed to give it back to me. But she wasn't ready to be that vulnerable yet. That was a big commitment to her. I think with me, it was just kind of words, honestly. That's the way a young man acts sometimes. He'll say something and he doesn't necessarily genuinely mean it. Now, love must be instilled. And this is going to maybe address what we were just talking about a second ago. It comes in response to love rather than lawful demands. Okay? How did it work with the children of Israel back in the old time? Here's the list. Well, for a while, they'd try to stay in it, right? And it was constantly a thing of stepping in and out, of doing right and doing wrong. Constantly failing. The old law showed us that we are dead in sin. Okay, that's what it did. But it did not, in and of itself, offer the remedy for the power or for the problem of sin. Christ did. Now Christ was part of the law and the prophets as everything pointed to him. But everything within the power of the old law was going to be something that just showed us our plight. God so loved the world in order to create love in us. But God shows his love for us, and while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. Think about that. I said something a little minute, or just a minute ago, about the fact that God didn't wait till we got everything lined out. Well, why was that? Why didn't he wait till we got it all lined out? Because we never would. Right? All have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Right? So, what it is God reaches out in love. He's demonstrated his own love toward us. At that time, we were the enemies of God. So when Christ says, love your enemies, it's not like God doesn't understand this concept, right? And then when he went to the cross, was it for all those folks that just were, Lord, we love you, we're here, and it's this little group? No. It's for all those that were out there saying, crucify him, crucify him. And we were there, folks. We were there. Oh, no, we weren't there physically, but we were there. Our lives, our being was there, because for every time that we have said something, maybe not verbally, but just in our hearts, about questioning God, questioning his love, questioning his care, haven't we kind of bucked the system? Haven't we kind of bucked against this love of God? Jesus took the form of man and died for us to gain our loving response. Philippians 2, verses 5 through 7. It is striking that John did not say, we love because he first commanded us. Right? What's it say? He first loved us. That's why we love, because he first loved us. He simply stated, we love because he first loved us, 1 John 4:19. Likewise, Paul recognized the true motivating forces in our lives as undeserved love, explaining that the love of Christ controls us or compels us. We're not compelled just by command. You do it. We are compelled by what we have seen that is amazing. We're not able to understand it. I'm telling you, when we really get that down, when that is just a part of us each and every day, then there's no questioning, well, should I share my faith with somebody? Think about how we share with others the things that our children have done or our grandchildren have done, or, what we've done in life. I get the little ones coming up, well, they're kind of looking at me like, an old guy like you, what do you, and then so I want to say, well, I played that game before, kind of, right? But when we're compelled by love, when the driving force, the motivating force is always love, we're not going to mistreat others because we know how well we've been treated. We're not going to slander others because there's a whole lot that could be said against us. And Satan's doing it all the time. When you think about it, Satan is the accuser. Hey, he is continually before, God, well, what about this? Did you see that? And you know the story of Job, right? But we have an advocate with the Father who's saying, the blood has been shed. Guiltless. Not because of all this good that I can throw out my chest and strut up before the Father. It won't be that way. Now there's a place for, love must be instilled, I said. There is a place for fear, okay? Now listen. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear. The motivation of fear will make us ineffective, for if I give away all I have, and if I deliver my body to be burned and have not love, I gain nothing. But here's the thing. Have you ever been afraid of losing the love of someone that you love very dearly? But maybe you have done something to mistreat them. And all of a sudden, maybe things are questionable. The fear that we should have is not the retribution of God. Yeah, God is in control of everything. And yes, we need to stand in awe of the holy and high God. But shouldn't our greatest fear be to lose His love? Not because He condemns us, but because His love is the source of every blessing that we have every day. And He, through His love, has shown us the way to treat others the right way. Once again, it goes back to this vulnerability thing. You make yourself vulnerable whenever you reach out in love and someone else does not return it. But God understands that, doesn't He? When we start to kind of put it together like that, instead of saying, well, I did this for you, got a kid a pair of shoes and football pads and stuff, and I did the wrong thing the other day, I kind of threw that down on the table because he wasn't quite, You can't do that. You don't start listing all the things that I have done for you, because we could never end the list of what God has done for us. So, yeah, fear. Fear falling out of love, fear falling out of His favor. But not because He's chasing you around. He is going to be the judge. He doesn't have to chase us around. But when we come to that point where we just bask in His love all of the time, that's when the very worst things can happen and we still go on. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
It's we who condemn ourselves by not following what God wants us to do. And when we start following what God wants us to do instead of what we want to do, your whole life will change.
That's right. And that is a great point.
Yes, sir.
I'm trying to think of the great writer. Well, anyway, there's a great Christian writer. He's long past now. But he wrote this. He said, let me think exactly how it went. It's a great thing when we say, Thy will be done. It's a terrible thing, or it can be a terrible thing, when in judgment God says, Thy will be done. And we have been in rebellion all of our lives. So that goes with what Larry's saying right there. It is we who make the choices that bring us to that place. God has reached out to us. The one who is over it all. The one who has created it all. The one who knows every thought you've ever had. Every motive. Every deed you've ever done. And yet, yes, sir.
I don't want to interrupt you.
No, that's all right.
In my mind, the first time I really wanted to start obeying God out of love and not out of fear was when I realized how wise His commands are. That they're all for me and
That's right.
else, for our benefit.
That's right.
Not to limit us, not to hold us back from anything. And the older I get, the wiser God becomes.
Absolutely.
So because I appreciate Him loving me that much,
Mm-hmm.
it's a great lead-up to then also loving Christ and the Spirit and the plan.
Mm-hmm.
So that was when I first started loving back the way I should.
Mm-hmm.
When I realized how wide and everything He had laid out from creation on
Mm-hmm.
is a demonstration of His love for me.
Absolutely. And you know, in Acts 2, I don't want you to think that there has never been fear struck in the hearts of men when they've been delivered the Word of God. I mean, the second chapter of Acts, okay, Peter would say, save yourselves from this untoward generation. Now, the thing about it is, it's a growing process, isn't it? And you've heard me use this one before, but I'll tell you again, when I was this big, it was a SWAT, okay? When I got to be this big, it was reward. Oh, I love my parents because I was getting that 50 cents for cutting the grass, you know? And then when I got to be 33, and my mother's laying in the hospital, and we're going to change her bedclothes because they were soiled. The nurse comes in. My sister says, just lay them right there. We'll take care of it. First, I'm kind of like, do you think she's going to, be embarrassed? And Lois says, no, she's about to die. And then, you know what came to me just like that? How many hundreds of diapers did my mother change? Right? And guess what compelled me? It wasn't because somebody was going to say, wow, that's a good thing to do, Al. It wasn't because my dad was going to come in and give me a SWAT. So it wasn't fear. It wasn't motivated by reward, but it was motivated by a deep love for her. Now, sometimes everybody's a little different. I've seen young people who seem to be able to grasp that concept. But usually, it takes time. It's a maturing process. Okay, next. Love is the greatest. Let's see if I can. All right, I just shut it off. How do I do that, Glenn? Okay, I pushed something wrong. The trigger. That's all right. Don't worry about it, brother. Okay, I'll just tell you. We don't have to look up there. Huh? Oh, okay. Yes, ma'am. All I want to do is advance it to number 2. I'll tell you what number 2 is. Love is the greatest command because it fulfills the intent of all other laws. Okay? I got it out of the thing there, but that's all right. All other laws. Thank you so much, Chris. Now, think about all the laws that we have of God. And then go back to what Larry said just a second. I said Larry. Sam said just a second ago. And that was when I came to understand there's wisdom in everything that God has given us as far as command. Then it was much easier to love His laws, to love His commands, to love the things that He wants of us. God has always given directives to guide our spiritual relationship with Him and our moral relationship with our fellow man. You see it in the 10 Commandments, okay? The first 4, Godward. The next 6, manward. We would not know how to relate to God or how to serve Him if it was not revealed. Jesus said, if you love me, you will keep my commands. Are you having a hard time walking in line with the will of God, all of us are going to struggle. I know that. Yes, ma'am. Okay. That's right. That's exactly right. He has called us friend. But there's something even greater than that. Behold, what manner of love God has bestowed upon us, that we should be called what? The children of God. Right? Man, there's no greater family. There is no greater family. I love my family. I love the Martin family. And if you've ever been at Pinellas Park for any length of time, you know it's like the Martin family reunion. These people, back when Terry and I were here, it was like a whole slew, wasn't it, Dennis? All of us here, just a crowd. But as much as I love my family, and you're going to the reunion next week? Okay, we have the McAllister reunion, and the Martins, are part of. As much as I love all of those people and their influence, spiritual influence on me through the years, the greatest family is my biggest family. And that family is red, brown, yellow, black, and white. And they are all precious in His sight. I've got brothers and sisters in Guyana. I've got brothers and sisters in Trinidad. I've got brothers and sisters in Romania. I've got brothers and sisters in China. And I've got brothers and sisters in Mexico. And that is the greatest family. It is. Bob and Peggy, they did fine. I will always love my parents. But it's the one who the Father is God that's most important. One should not attend, pray, sing, give, etc. because he is commanded to do so. He should do these things as an expression of a loving relationship. The instructions only tell us how to express our love. Most of these directives are exhortations rather than lawful demands. Hence, we are exhorted to attend, pray, sing, and give. When you come to that understanding, then you're not standing back in the back checking off. Okay, I was here. I have prayed this week. I've read my Bible. Okay, what I'm saying is we don't do the checklist. It's our life. It's not these extra things that we do to secure life. But it's just who I am. It's how I think. Now, the person who has never read the Bible can fulfill the moral law and its general meaning. Nothing is required of us in our man-to-man relationship that is not motivated by love. Paul is emphatic on this. Owe no one anything except to love one another, for he who loves his neighbor has fulfilled the law. Okay? Love your neighbor. Yes. And then you're saying, well, that goes back to that commandment. Once again, once we come to understand God's love for us, then if we say, we've got to love our neighbor. I mean, how can I say I'm greater than God? You see where this is going? In other words, if I say, well, I don't have to love you, but God does, am I saying I'm higher than God? Am I saying, hey, I can do what I want to do? God's going to say, oh, pride is going to take you down. And it will. Love does no wrong to a neighbor. Therefore, love is fulfilling the law. Romans 13, 8 through 10. If a person loves his neighbor, he will not steal his money or his wife. He will not murder him or lie to him. This is a negative expression. In a positive expression, Jesus said, so whatever you wish that men would do to you, do also unto them. Matthew 7:12. Jesus said, this is the law and the prophets. On these two commands depend all the law and the prophets. I said that earlier. Everything that we see over in the Old Testament hangs upon these two laws. Love God, love your fellow man. Through the centuries, God has been trying to get us to love Him and one another. It's the intent of the law of Moses and the message of the prophets. Love fulfills the purpose of God's laws. Now, here I go to number 3. Dennis, how much time do I have? Is it quarter till that we finish?
2 minutes, you'll hear the first bell and 5 minutes.
Okay, well, we might be able to get most of this. Okay, so I do this, and then that. Oh. Yeah, I'm hitting the trigger, and then do that. Oh, you just hit one or the other. Okay, that's all right. Number 3, love lifts us above efforts of legal justification. Now, I want to hit this one. If we don't get number 4, that's okay. I want to hit this because it's so very important. A legal code specifies, defines, and enumerates. When one meets the specifications, he is legally righteous and free from further demands of the law. Okay, do you understand what I'm saying here so far? If I just meet the requirements, then I'm good. That's it. Just meet the requirements. You know where this is going? Me stepping out the back door of our house up in Kentucky, we had a large yard. And I'm telling my son, okay, I want all this cut. And I'm pointing where? At the backyard. Now, is that what I meant? No. So I'm sitting in the living room, and 25 minutes later, here he bops in. And I said, what are you doing? He said, I finished the grass. And I said, you cut the whole yard in 25 minutes? And he goes, I cut all you showed me. You see what I'm saying? What does that do with our relationship to God? I'm going to do just what you ask of me, and that's all. We don't go the distance. Now, what if Christ, walking the Via Dolorosa, the road to the cross, to Calvary, said, okay, this is it right here, this far as I'm going. I mean, this is good enough. Haven't you seen everything I've gone through? This is enough. When we get in that mindset with God, I'm just going to do what I need to do, we're kind of checking out. Like, Sunday is the Lord's. Now, Monday, it's pretty much mine. Tuesday, Wednesday, make sure Wednesday night, I've got the Lord in mind. You see what I'm saying? And it goes back to that thing of doing. Here's what it is. When it's just master and slave relationship, and you're the cruel master who is just telling me what to do, I do just what I need to do. But when you've got the father-child relationship, what can I do for you to honor you because you love me so much? You see, there's a difference. There's a difference. When we are people who feel truly blessed all the time, that the love of God is just overwhelming to us, then it's not what are the things that I have to do, but rather what do I get to do? We get ready to clean the cottage. We do what's called a deep clean on Saturdays. And that is, what must I do to get you off my back? You know, I go into the room and I'm like, sock, so-and-so. Okay, and they get those, and I'm like, I haven't even looked at that floor in there. Like, okay, go get a mop. Okay. Then there are those times I just want to fall dead from a heart attack because I walk in and everything is done and I see them just going at it. It's because they love me. No, it's because we're probably going to a Rays game or something like that. But that's the reward part. You remember what I told you in this maturity thing? Okay. Now, what is the minimum that a righteous man may do for his wife and children? He is not concerned about minimums, is he? Any good man is not concerned about the minimums that he can do for his wife and children. Why is it different with God? I'll give him what I've got, left. I'm going to tell you right now, I've got a wonderful wife. She wouldn't have put up with that for very long. She'd been kicking me in the pants saying, hey, come on now, you can do better. So, why do we feel like we just need to know what the minimum is? What he wants is not some days. He doesn't want some very weak praise. He wants our heart. That's what he wants. That means I die to me and I live to him. And that's why you see people like the Apostle Paul, Peter, James, John, all those apostles, all those martyrs in the first century, and even the ones that weren't martyrs that just went ahead and lived their lives so devoted to God because they came to that understanding. He is my everything. Okay, let me hit this last one just quickly. Love is the greatest command because it transcends any sense of duty. This kind of goes back to some of the things I've already said. When it's my duty, then I feel like I've got this thing on me that I've got to do. You ever go to Chick-fil-A? Anybody ever go to Chick-fil-A? What is it when you say something to them? What do they say to you? It's my pleasure, right? Hey, when our every answer to God's call is, it's my pleasure, then we have learned, we've started to grasp that relationship that is based on love. Not on fear, not on reward, but on love. Okay? So let's think about those things. Thank you so much for your kind attention. I'm sorry about my... I'm not a real high-tech person. And Chris, thank you so much for getting those things for me. I didn't know if this was going to work either, me reading off of this, but it worked okay.
Well, I'm glad to see you all here today and get this opportunity to bring to you a lesson. See that lesson? See that beautiful picture right there? That's because this lesson is going to be a positive lesson. A comedian once said that if you ended the statement, whatever you said, if you ended the statement with, I mean that in the nicest way, that you could say something difficult for someone to hear, but they wouldn't be offended because you said it in the nicest way. For example, why did you wear that shirt? But I mean that in the nicest way. That haircut is not you, but I mean that in the nicest way. Now I want you to remember that because the title of my lesson is Live Like You Are Dying. That doesn't sound too good, but I mean that in the nicest way. The fact is that we all are dying from the very day that we are born. When I talk about this lesson today, say, live like you are dying, I want you to remember this. I want you to live like you're doing the will of God. The purpose of my lesson is to point out that we live in a world of, I want you to listen to this, Not selfies, self-me. It's all about me, me, me. But we should be thinking of he. Our Father in heaven. Live like you're dying to self, putting ourselves back. But really, we're living for God. Live like you're dying to self. And Jesus was our greatest example of this. But sometimes we lose focus. We take our eyes off of God until we are hit with something that is devastatingly life-changing. And I think some of you all are sitting here, well, Tim, you're preaching this lesson because you've got cancer. I'm preaching this lesson because it's a true fact. We're all dying. If I read the paper today, I could find people in there who died earlier than me. But we all need to remember that at any time. We're not promised tomorrow. I mean that in the nicest way. Remember that. Everything is positive. I'm going to come down here. Glenn, they can still hear me down here, right? I want to show you a song that was written by Tim McGraw. It's a true life experience about his father and what happened with his father. I have to use the mic is not working. All right, I'll use this one. That's fine. Okay, now can you hear me? Okay, then I don't need this. That's good. All right, look at this. This is a song that Tim McGraw wrote about an experience he had with his father. I was in my early 40s with a lot of life before me when a moment came and stopped me on a dime. I spent most of the next days looking at x-rays, talking about the options when it sank in that this might really be the real end. How's it hit you when you get that kind of news? Man, what are you going to do? That situation happened, and look what happened. I loved deeper, I spoke sweeter. I gave forgiveness, I've been denied. Someday I hope you get the chance to live like you are dying. I was finally the husband that most of the time I wasn't. I became a friend would like to have. All of a sudden going fishing wasn't such an imposition. I went 3 times that year I lost my dad. I finally read the good book. And my ear fell off. I finally read the good book, and I took a good, long, hard look at what I'd do if I could do it all again. Someday you get the chance to live like you were dying. Live like tomorrow is a gift, and you've got eternity to think about. Sometimes from very, very bad and difficult situations, good things can happen. This man all of a sudden started loving deeper, spoke sweeter, became the husband he was supposed to be. Why? Because he got refocused on actually what important things are in life. I met a woman at Moffitt. Over Cancer Center over in Tampa. She was given 6 months to live, and she was told to call hospice by a different hospital. Instead, she found information about some new treatment at Moffitt. And she's been taking that medicine for 3.5 years now. And boy, when you talk to her, you realize she appreciates every day. The best thing about going through very challenging and life-threatening experiences is that you get refocused on what truly is important in life. Because, this is going to sound like bad news, life is short. One of the reasons I like to tell jokes, you say, you're going to tell a joke? One of the reasons I like to tell jokes is because of this. as far as the funny part goes, there's also sometimes a very good message that goes along with it. So I'm going to tell you a joke. Of course, it has to do with life is short. Two young men were best friends. And they did a lot of things together, but what their favorite thing to do together was play baseball. One of them was named Brad, and the other one was named Steve. Well, one day Brad was driving his car and got into a car accident. Brad was killed. Boy, that hurt Steve so bad. He missed his friend so bad. About a year goes by, and Steve has a dream. There's Brad. Brad's in a baseball outfit. Hey, Brad, is that you? Yeah. You're in a baseball outfit. Yes, I am. Are you in heaven? Yes, I am. They have baseball in heaven? Yes, and that's the good news. What's the bad news? You're scheduled to pitch tomorrow night. Life is short. In Psalms 90, verse 12, Psalms 90, verse 12 says, David says, "So teach us to number our days, that we might apply our hearts to wisdom." 1 Peter 1:24, "All flesh is grass, and all the glory of man has the flower of the grass. The grass withers and its flower falls away." James 4:14 tells us truly about our life. "Why do you not even know what will happen tomorrow? What is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes." Life is a vapor. But here's the one I want to pay attention to too. 1 Thessalonians 5:1-2. "The Lord can come at any time. But of the times and the seasons, brethren, ye have no need that I write unto you, for yourselves you know perfectly that the day of the Lord so cometh as a thief in the night." Another fact is, death is for certain. A very famous quote, I don't know if you can read it or not, a very famous quote by Benjamin Franklin: "Nothing is certain but death and taxes." Boy, that is so true. God made man. In Genesis chapter 2, verse 7, "The Lord God formed man from the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. The man became a living being." God breathed the life into man. Every breath that we take comes from God. And someday He's going to take that breath away. In Ecclesiastes 12:7, "Ashes to ashes, dust to dust." You've heard that before at maybe a gravesite or something. Ecclesiastes 12:7 says, "Then the dust returns to the earth as it was, and the spirit shall return into God who gave it." God formed us from the dust of the earth, and someday our fleshly bodies are going to return to dust. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 1 and 2. "There's a time to be born and a time to die." I want you to look at this, because I know I have fallen into it. Look at this. This person right here was, 83 years old when they died. Do the math. I'm a math teacher. Anyhow, if you went to a gravesite and you looked at that tomb and you're sitting there and you're looking at those two numbers, you're sitting there looking, that person lived a good long life. How, in those 83 years, how do you know how that person lived? That person may have a miserable life. We look at the numbers and don't pay attention to the little dash in between. The little dash in between is the most important part of that. That's how the person lived their life. Jesus died at 33 years old. That dash is so important. You pay more attention to the numbers on the gravesite instead of saying how long and looking at how so long someone lived. Instead of, we should be wondering about that dash, which represents the way the person lived. I used to tell my high school class this because I wanted them to understand the power of Satan. So I used to tell them, look, the devil's most powerful weapon is death. Because if he can get you to die before you commit your life to Christ or God, he's got you. You think how powerful that is? You can't change anything after that. You've lived that life. You had your opportunity. But let me tell you something. I have changed a little bit of my mind on that. And here's why. Because I have said that after death, that's it. Your book is closed. But you know what? Your book is not closed. You know how I know that? Because I still have people telling me about my mother who was a teacher, and they said, your mother changed my life. That little dash goes on. If you wanted to, you could put a little dash back here. How you affected those that you came in contact with and the way that you lived your life. So I would have no problem if someone decided to put a dash back there. When I got this bad news, I had a whole bunch of people write me cards. I said, oh, they were so, man, you talk about sweet and you talk about comforting. People say, hey, Tim, we're praying for you. Some of my students, Mr. Martin, you changed my life. Don't really understand the effect that you can possibly have on other people's lives unless you're living as a Christian. Let me give some examples of they lived a life focused on God. Not me, but he. What about Noah? In Genesis chapter 6, go over there with me real quick. Genesis chapter 6, we're going to read about a man named Noah. Genesis chapter 6, starting in verse 5. God saw the wickedness of man was great on the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And repented the Lord that he had made man on earth, and it grieved him at his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and the creeping thing, and the fowls of the earth, for it repenteth me that I have made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Now go over to Genesis chapter 7, verse 1, and look what God says about Noah. The Lord said to Noah, come thou and all thy house into the ark, for thee I have seen righteous before me in this generation. If anybody ever had the excuse that everybody else is doing it, I might as well do it too. Everybody else is sinning. Noah did. Because there was only one man God found that was righteous. One. But just because everybody else was doing it, that is no excuse to God. That's no excuse. What about Moses? Let's go over to Exodus chapter 33. Exodus chapter 33 and verse 11. And the Lord spake unto Moses face to face, as a man speaketh to his friend. And he turned again the camp, but his servant Joseph, the son of Nun, a young man, departed not out of the tabernacle. God called Moses a friend. I speak to him face to face. What a wonderful compliment that is. Go over to Deuteronomy, verse 34. Chapter 34, I'm sorry. Deuteronomy 34, verse 7. Moses was 120 years when he died, but here's what I want you to pay attention to. He was 120 years, so everybody's saying, well, he lived a good, long, hard life. He did. But you know what? There was nothing wrong with him. He lived such a good life. God took care of him because the Bible says that his eyes were not dim. Nothing in the world wrong with his eyes, and his body had not lost its natural vigor. But God decided it was time for Moses to go. God called Moses. So it was time for Moses to go. But God had taken care of him because of the way he had lived his life. And at the end of his life, there was nothing in the world physically wrong with that man. What about John the Baptist? Go to Matthew. Matthew chapter 11. Matthew chapter 11, verse 11. John the Baptist. Verily I say unto you, among them that are born of women, there hath not risen a greater than John the Baptist. Notwithstanding that he is the least in the kingdom of heaven, is greater than he. John the Baptist was a man who had one purpose. His purpose was to prepare the way for the Son of God. And he devoted his life to that. Luke chapter 3 and verse 19. Go over there. Luke chapter 19. Oh, I'm sorry, Luke chapter 3. Luke 3:19. But Herod the Tetrarch, being reproved by him, by John the Baptist, for Herodias, by his brother's Philip's wife, and for all the evils which Herod had done. What happened was John the Baptist spoke the truth to Herod. He told Herod, you're living wrong. You're living in a sinful life. And because he spoke the truth, his head was cut off. He was beheaded. You know how old he was? He was early 30s because he died in the ministry while Jesus Christ was doing his ministry. And so he died in his early 30s. Now, of course, Jesus. Go to Matthew 26 and verse 39. Matthew 26, verse 39. He went a little farther. He went a little farther and fell on his face and prayed, saying, O my Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but thine. Jesus was not here to do his own will. He was here to do the will of his Father. He lived a life doing the will of his Father. At the age of 12 years old, he's preaching in the temple at 12 years old. Going about his Father's business. In 1 Peter chapter 2. 1 Peter chapter 2, 21 and 22. For even hereunto were ye called, because Christ also suffered for us, leaving us an example that ye should follow in his steps. Who did no sin, neither was guile found in his mouth. Did not sin, but he died for us. What about Christians? Go to Galatians chapter 2 and verse 20. Galatians 2:20. I am crucified with Christ, nevertheless I live. Yet not I that live, but Christ liveth in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by faith of the Son of God. I want you to look at this quote from Mark Twain. And I don't know if he meant it the way I'm going to mean it, but I'll tell you what, I'm going to use it. Look at this. The two most important days in your life are the day that you were born and the day you find out why. Why was I born? What is my purpose? Your purpose is to do the will of God, so that you have a hope of going to heaven when you die. That's the two most important days in your life. Christians should be dying. We should be dying to spread the gospel. Why? Because in Mark chapter 16, verse 15, it says, "And he said unto them," Christ said unto them, "Go you into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature." We should be dying to spread the gospel. Tell others about the good news. It's good news, not bad news. Christians should be dying to help others. Galatians 6:10. "And as we have therefore opportunity, let us do good unto all men, especially to them who are the household of faith." You know what the Bible says about Jesus? The Bible says that he went about doing... Somebody say it. Good. How simple was that? I mean, he did all these miracles. He raised the dead. He healed the sick. And then all of a sudden the Bible just puts it and says, he went about doing good. Well, can't we do that? Can't we just go about doing good? Make this world a better place. I used to say to my children, when they were growing up, I said, "Hey, what have you done today for our house, for our family?" And they're like, "What do you mean?" "What have you done to make the house run better today? Have you made your bed? Have you taken the trash out?" "Oh, I thought you have to tell us that." "Why would I have to tell them that?" My kids aren't here today. Okay, all right. Christians should be dying to worship God. In John chapter 4 and verse 23, "But the hour is coming, and now is, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For the Father is seeking such to worship Him." Christians should be dying to fellowship one with another. Oh, that's a good one. 1 John chapter 1 verse 7. "If we walk in the light as He is in the light, we have fellowship with one another." We come here to build each other up, to find out how you doing, to pray for each other. That's what this whole fellowship thing is about. And worshiping God, of course. But it draws us closer together because we become like-minded. Christians should be dying to pray for one another. I have had so many people say, "Tim, I'm praying for you." By the way, keep it up. Keep it up. Because right now I'm doing pretty good. Anyhow, James chapter 5 verse 16 says, "Confess your faults one to another, pray for one another that you may be healed. The effectual fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth." A little bit? Much. A lot. Availeth much. God listens to a man, a righteous man. We need to pray for each other. And Christians should be dying to let Christ live in us. I'm sorry, I skipped one. We should be dying to read and study the Bible. 2 Timothy 2:15. "Study to show yourself approved unto God." "Study to show yourself approved unto God. A workman needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth." The only way you can divide the word and understand the word of God is to handle it and to read it, to understand it. And Christians should let Christ live in us. Galatians 2:20. "I'm crucified with Christ. Nevertheless I live, not I, but Christ liveth in me. And the life which I live now in flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave Himself for me." I'm going to tell you another joke. But remember, the joke has a message. Remember that. Preacher was invited to the first and second grade Bible class to teach the Bible class. Preacher's like, what am I going to preach on with those little kids? He said, you know what? I got the perfect thing. I'm going to go in there and tell them about heaven. So he walks in there and they're all sitting around in a little semicircle, got their hands folded. And so the preacher says, heaven's a beautiful place. Now, how many of you all want to go to heaven? Well, they all raised their hand except one little boy didn't raise his hand. He said, well, that's strange. He said, okay, all right, okay. Heaven is a beautiful place, and Jesus and God live there. Now, how many of you want to go to heaven? Well, they all raise their hand, but that little boy don't raise his hand. The preacher's like, okay, what in the world? All right, look. Heaven's a beautiful place. Jesus and God live there, and the streets are paved with gold. Now, how many of you want to go to heaven? They all raise their hand, but that little boy don't raise his hand. The preacher's starting to get a little agitated. Okay, look. Heaven's a beautiful place. Jesus and God live there. Streets are paved with gold, and we have our own mansion there. Now, how many of you want to go to heaven? They all raise their hand, but not that little boy. So finally, the preacher goes over to the little boy and says, look, hey, don't you want to go to heaven when you die? And the little boy said, oh, when I die, I thought you were getting the group to go right now. We should want to go to heaven when we die. John 3:16 says, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. Whosoever believeth in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. We have an opportunity to have everlasting life. If we live a life of he, and not me right now. I'm going to ask you now the same question the preacher asked the little boy. Do you want to go to heaven when you die? Well, of course, the answer is yes. The thing is, are you doing anything about it, though? Everyone in this building, I know everyone in this building does, we need to make sure, though, that we're dying to self, but living like Christ, doing the will of our Heavenly Father. We are not promised tomorrow. Whenever I come into a conversation with people, people are, when people find out you got cancer, they go like this. They're in the, hey man, hey yeah, I'm just getting, and all of a sudden Tim Martin comes in. They're like, oh hey Tim. What does that mean? I'm going to die tomorrow? We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I don't mean to drag the conversation down, but I'm doing all right. We are not promised tomorrow, and life is short, and that's a fact. And I mean that in the nicest way. But if you've never confessed Jesus as the Son of God, you need to do that today. And so that he will confess you before his Father in heaven. He promises that. You confess me before man. And when you get to, by the way, when you get to heaven, you can only call one witness. You can't call your mother, Mom, tell him how good I was, Mom. Tell him. You can't, your father can't tell. Your boss can't, oh, he was the hardest worker. No. On Judgment Day, there'll be one that will witness for you, and that will be Jesus Christ. And Jesus Christ will say, he confessed me before men, Father. He's one of ours. If you have sinned and you want to rededicate your life to God, asking for the prayers of the congregation, the church, whatever your need, if you'll come forward as we stand and sing number 594.